Hey people, I'm ZSH Plays. Welcome to Building Jurassic Park. This week we're going to be building the Pterosaur Peak, making some improvements to the Sauropod Swamp, and adding in an implied area for the restaurant as well. And we're going to be starting right here. So in the book, the first time that we encounter the Pterosaur Peak is when Grant and Co see the roof of the dome for the aviary above the trees when they're at the Jungle River ride on the Jeep tour. So when they're, or shortly after they've seen the Dilophosaurs, which is why we were locating it here. And it's also called Pterosaur Peak, so I'm presuming it is on raised ground, and that'll also make sure that we can see it from the Jeep tour by the Dilophosaurs, because that is the intention. So I'm raising the terrain here, and then doing a bit of terrain painting to make it look more like a rocky outcrop than just a hill. And then we'll put the dome in. It's kind of a shame in this game that the aviary domes only enable you to make a series of domes joined together rather than being able to make a dome really big, because that is how it's described in the book. When they get in there, Grant estimates it at being about 1/4 of a mile long, and there's no way to really replicate that in the game and still have it be a dome. So I'm going to use two of them joined together. So just like this, we'll put these two in. So it's still quite dome shaped. It's going to be a lot smaller than it should be, but as I've mentioned before, the space on this map is pretty limited, and it does look really good when it's done, so I don't mind too much that it's smaller than it should be. I've tried to make the inside as closely to the novel as described. There's actually another safari lodge inside the dome, that's how big it is, where I guess we're supposed to be able to stay, but due to the Cearadactylus attacking people, that's never got finished. So I do end up putting another one of the safari lodges behind the dome just to sort of simulate that, but sadly I can't get it inside the dome. Doing a lot of terrain painting here as well to sit it in nicely. We're going to make a nice little path up to it as well. Again, in the book, the Jungle River ride actually goes through the dome rather than past it, but I didn't seem to be able to work out a way to get water to run downhill when I was trying to build, and with so little space anyway, I just decided to have the river run past the dome rather than through it. And then I've actually put a river inside the dome, so when you're in there it should look as described. There's a river running through it. I've got a nice little pile of rocks outside as well to make it look a bit more interesting. You know, I love my rocks, and we'll do some last little bits of terrain painting as well. And when you go past on the Jeep tour, you can see it poking above the trees exactly as you should do, which is nice. Thank you so much for all your comments on the last episode, by the way. Got some really interesting ones. Yordman Batgod said that the Euoplocephalus works pretty well as a Microceratops replacement, if I wanted to try that. And I can see exactly what he means. They are pretty small and they stand on two legs, etc. But the Euoplocephalus is about 6 foot tall, and a Pachycephalosaurid dinosaur. Microceratops is less than 2 feet long and a member of the Ceratopsians. So for me, I don't think they're quite similar enough to want to put them in here. So I'm going to leave those for the moment. But thank you for the suggestion, because I hadn't checked those dinosaurs out before and I really like them. I think I'll be using them in a park somewhere, just not this one. Moving on to the inside of the dome now. It's described as having both palm trees and then meadows of grass in it, and obviously the river running through it. In this little space, I'm going to do as much as I can to replicate that. And now that the flying dinosaurs can perch on rocks, obviously I'm going to use that excuse to put even more rocks in. And when I release them, the first thing one of them does is go and sit on those rocks. So that was pleasing. So just scatter a load of rocks around, and then we'll move on to painting the river in. So as always, putting some sand on the banks to tie the terrain into the water. And then something I did here, which I think worked really well, is painted under the water with a couple of different shades of rock, which is darker than the mixture of soil and grass that's in there by default, in order to make it look deeper. And I think that works really nicely, actually. And just while I finish that off, if you're watching this, I'm going to assume that you watch them anyway, but just in case you don't, check out Evolution Square. She is doing some absolutely amazing builds in this game. She just did a Tyrannosaurus, call it a Tyrannosaurus Center. It's like one giant habitat with loads of different viewing, different areas in it, different heights for the guests to view things from. It looks absolutely amazing. It's so creative. She's done so much with this game. So yeah, in case you haven't, do check her out. It is finally time to release the Cearadactylus once we've put these last few decorations in. Always my favourite bit of any build, when you get to see the dinosaurs coming into it. So here we go. It is so good to have the flying dinosaurs in this. This was one of the main reasons that I wanted to make the novel version of Jurassic Park rather than the film version, because it gives me an excuse to get these guys in there. They are so cool. Definitely one of my favourite builds so far, and you'll see a lot more of it in the cinematics at the end. We're going to move on now to making some improvements to Sauropod Swamp. This is off the back of some more of the comments that I got on the last episode, mainly from Clayface, who pointed out that the Sauropod Swamp was actually visible from the T-Rex paddock, not the Dilophosaur jungle river. So the reason I actually made the Sauropod Swamp visible from the Dilophosaurus was that there is a lot of confusion as to exactly where the sauropods are in the book. So the first dinosaur we see in the book is the Apatosaurs. Grant and Ellie see them, or see their heads poking out above the trees, pretty much as soon as they get off the helicopter at the beginning. Now, Apatosaurs are big, but they've got tiny little heads. Considering how huge their bodies are, their heads are about the size of like a normal cow, I think. So there's no way they would have been looking at their heads and even being able to see the expressions on their faces if Sauropod Swamp was, right down the other end of the park. So I figured it must be the first exhibit or very, very close to the helicopter pad. However, when they take the Jeep tour, they get to Sauropod Swamp after the T-Rex. So they've already been through Hypsilophodont Highlands, the Jungle River, Triceratops territory, and the carnivore country with the T-Rex, which obviously means it must be down the other end of the park. But then the beginning of the book suggests that it's right at the beginning, so I decided to go with the beginning of the book and put it there. But Clayface makes a very good point. So what I've done is actually extended the Sauropod Swamp, so it runs all the way from the start of the park, where we saw it in the previous episode, right the way up to behind the T-Rex paddock. So now we've got all bases covered. So thanks a lot for that comment. That was really useful. And I actually prefer the Sauropod Swamp now. It is much bigger. I've cut a hole in the trees as well so that they can get through between the two different areas and put some more Apatosaurs in. And they seem to happily mingle about between those two areas. Now the last thing that we're going to do today, I mentioned this last week, is the restaurant. So in the book, the sort of ridge that the restaurant sits on is there, but there's no restaurant in it. So what I decided to do was build the ridge so that we got something interesting to look at. And now that they've added the Department for Wildlife buildings into the game, they've got a really good sort of utilitarian look to them, which means I've used, I think it's the restroom from that pack to simulate a sort of, porter cabin building site where the restaurant is currently under construction. And we'll just sit that on top of that ridge there to simulate where the restaurant is being built at the moment. And then while I finish that, one final comment that I had was from the Quiet Alert, who asked, do you use mods, or are these all original? So I don't use mods on this channel, just so that everything that I build here is something that you could build yourself. If you want to follow along, or if you're inspired by anything I build, you don't need to go crazy downloading any mods or anything like that in order to get it to work. And that is this week's episode done. So thank you so much for watching as always. Subscribe if you enjoyed it. The next episode will be on Sunday, when we'll be adding everybody's favourite dinosaur into the park, Rexy. See you then. Bye.